Now on BBC One, an investigation into the cover-up of sexual abuse within the cadet forces, with scenes some viewers may find upsetting. Panorama.
I promise to honour my God, my Queen and my country, and to do my best to serve them loyally and honourably at all times through the Tennell Grange Troop Army Cadet Force.
The Army, Air and Sea Cadets. Youth organisations where nearly 130,000 children in Britain seek fun and adventure.
I further promise to be a good citizen and to do my duty to God and the Queen, my country and my flag.
Overseen by the Ministry of Defence, the state is responsible for the welfare of cadets.
And to do my best to serve loyally and honourably at all times.
Look back, look up. Now where are you going to go?
Children who join the cadets make a promise to serve loyally. But for some, that promise was betrayed. People in positions of power abused their trust and committed the most serious crimes. Crimes that in many cases were covered up. Stuart was an air cadet in the 1990s.
Let's talk, right? I've never talked like this to anybody before.
This is the moment he confronts the cadet officer who abused him as a child.
Yeah, I often felt I wanted to just cuddle you.
Just cuddle me.
No, I
Chris, you touched my dick.
I did, yes. But inappropriate, totally, absolutely wrong.
14 years after the abuse, Stuart secretly recorded this confession.
I was doing it to stop him causing any more damage to young people in the future. Finally, I'll be able to do something about something that's been bugging me for a long, long time.
Today, Stuart has come to see lawyers David and Rebecca, who are trying to uncover the extent of abuse within the cadets. They're pursuing a compensation case against the Ministry of Defence for what happened to Stuart. The man Stuart had confronted was Chris Day, the commanding officer of his Air Cadet unit in Woodford, Essex. Day abused Stuart on a cadet trip when Stuart was 15. More than a decade later, Stuart went to see Chris Day with a hidden recording device.
I went straight down to where he worked. He came out of his office and he went white as a ghost. And then he said, "Not here at my work, please, please, please," and started begging. So I said, "Come back to my house. Come and see me. We have to talk."
I don't need to tell you this, you know this, you've overstepped the mark, you've abused your position, okay? What you've done...
I've just admitted that to you.
Yeah, I know you've admitted it to me. I know you've admitted it to me.
I haven't admitted that to anyone else, Stuart, in my whole life.
Chris Day was tried, and his confession was played at the court case. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Stuart's story is not a one-off. For the last 7 months, Panorama has been investigating sexual abuse within the cadets. Repeatedly, across the country, we found a pattern of senior members of the cadet forces who knew abuse was going on, but didn't report it to the police.
David and Rebecca work for law firm Bolt, Bird & Kemp, who specialise in making claims in child abuse cases.
I think when we received our first instruction to bring a claim against the MOD for abuse in the cadets, at the time there was no real way to know that this was going to be on the scale that it is today. But slowly and gradually, more and more clients have come forward to us seeking help to hold the MOD to account, and I can only see that rapidly increasing in the future. I have absolutely no doubt that the abuse in the cadets will mirror the other scandals, like the Jimmy Savile case, like abuse in the Scouts, like abuse in the Catholic Church.
Our investigation took us to Cheshunt in Hertfordshire. And to Tony, who lived nearby as a boy. He joined the Cheshunt Sea Cadets in 1979, aged 13.
He was quite a quiet boy. He liked his motors and all that when he was little, and then as he grew up, my dad had been in the Navy and he was very interested in that sort of thing.
Well, the reason I joined is because my parents wanted to keep me off the streets and out of trouble. I must admit, the things I did there I would have never have done otherwise. You know, I went and shot guns and 303 rifles and sailing and all that, which, you know, was real good fun.
Tony regularly went on trips with the unit to naval bases. He loved the experience until he went for a long weekend to HMS Pembroke in Chatham, Kent in 1981.
Tony come back from the trip and he was very quiet. He didn't have a lot to say about it, which we thought as strange. Anyway, then I got talking to him. I think it was the second day he was home, and he said, I don't want to go. He was due to go on another trip, and he said, I don't want to go. So I said, why on earth don't you want to go? And it came out.
This is the first time Tony has spoken to anyone about this outside his close family.
I was away on a trip when it was in a mess hall with about 20, 30 kids in it, you know. And one night, obviously there was a sensation here. I woke up and there he was. I think he was actually crashing down by the bed, and then he stood up as soon as I woke up. And so I looked down and I was exposed, you know, and there was no doubt in my mind that, you know, well, he was touching me, no doubt in my mind whatsoever.
You were 15. How did you react?
Shocked. You're wondering all night, you know, what's going to happen? Is he going to come back? You know, what'd you do? Where'd you go? And then the next morning, you know, I was still thinking, has this happened to me?
The man in question was Alan Waters, then aged 33. In his day job, he was working with children at the local education authority. In his downtime, he was the commanding officer of the Cheshunt Sea Cadets unit.
My dad was really angry. He wanted to sort of kill him.
My husband was absolutely distraught. He went out in the car looking for where Waters lived, and thank God he didn't find him, because if he had, I think we would have ended up being in trouble.
Carol and her husband approached a senior member of Cheshunt Sea Cadets and told him what had happened to their son, Tony. He promised action and reported it up the cadet chain of command. A few days later, Carol and her husband had a visit at the family home.
These two people come from the head office, and they turned up in a really big posh car, and they had a full uniform all on, and all, like, I can remember gold bits on the uniform.
The men who came to the house completely accepted Tony's allegations, but said they wanted to deal with the matter internally.
We was ready to go to the police, and they convinced us that we should not go to the police. They tried to explain to us that if we went to the police, that the Sea Cadets could be stopped and therefore it wouldn't do the children in the area any good, because it does keep the children off the streets and that. So I was really put in the position of, what do you do?
It became clear that other parents also had concerns about Alan Waters. They were all invited by Sea Cadet officers to Cheshunt Cadet Base. Waters wasn't present at the meeting.
There was other parents there as well, and it came out what he'd done to other boys. He made it as if it was having fun, like he'd put things on their willies and string, and it was all like silly little sexual things. And between us parents that was there, we had to decide what we was going to do. And it was decided that he would be dismissed from Cheshunt and not work with children anymore if we didn't go to the police.
In return for not pressing the complaint, Tony's parents say they were promised Alan Waters would never work with children again. But Panorama has discovered that was a lie. The Sea Cadets didn't dismiss him, they didn't even suspend him. In fact, they actually promoted him and moved him to another division of the cadets.
But the warnings didn't stop. Alan Waters' new job was Assistant District Officer in North London, overseeing 10 Sea Cadet units. Panorama has discovered this letter from an officer from one of those units sent at the time. He tries to alert the Sea Cadets to the potential danger Waters poses, because it is inevitable that he will come into contact with children. The reply from the Royal Navy captain in charge of all the Sea Cadets says the allegations against Waters were thoroughly investigated and not proved. In the reply, he also says Alan Waters' promotion had been approved from the top because his undoubted talents should not be lost to the Corps.
It appears that Cadet High Command disregarded Tony's allegation and the concerns of other parents and allowed Alan Waters to continue having full access to children.
In the late 70s, the Ministry of Defence made this recruitment film, promoting the culture of cadet life and how instructors could help guide children. In many cases, young cadets came from backgrounds. Their welfare was entrusted to the care of cadet staff, all volunteers with day jobs.
For difficult or distressed youngsters coming in, they can immediately identify and feel secure. Here's a family set-up, if you like. They know what's required of them, they know what we want to do. I think immediately, you know, they've got this feeling of security.
By the 1980s, Britain's cadet forces were at the heart of many communities across the country. Glasgow was no exception. One of the city's army cadet centres, the Glasgow Highlanders Battalion, was based on Hotspur Street on the west side of the city. The commanding officer here was 30-year-old John Fitzpatrick, who was very popular with the boys in his care. In 1987, Gordon was an instructor at the unit. He was told that Fitzpatrick had sexually assaulted a cadet.
And 3 young cadets came over to me and said they would like to have a wee chat in private. They witnessed sexual abuse in one of the cadet rooms in an overnight stay.
Gordon went straight to the police to report the allegations about John Fitzpatrick. But when he told his senior officer what he'd done, the man was furious Gordon had involved the police.
He went ballistic. He was shouting over the phone, swearing, saying that I shouldn't have went to the police. I should have phoned him and he'd have dealt with it.
Glasgow cadets didn't just put pressure on Gordon. Panorama has spoken to the parents of the boy abused at the cadet unit. They were also told not to go to the police. That's a story we've heard before. In Cheshunt, Tony's parents were pressured not to report an incident of child abuse. And here in Glasgow too, the cadets apparently didn't want the police to investigate criminal activity committed by the commanding officer. But John Fitzpatrick was suspended after the boy's parents refused to be bullied into silence. They went to the police and the case went to court. Panorama understands the jury came back with a verdict of not proven. In Scottish law, that means acquittal where there isn't enough evidence to prove the allegations. John Fitzpatrick went straight back into the unit and took up his role as commanding officer once again.
Strangely, it was like a hero's welcome, kind of slapping you back and welcome back kind of thing. And I was shocked at the reception he got. Nobody investigated John Fitzpatrick, never come in and spoke to the cadets, never came in and spoke to me.
Another boy, Colin, then joined the cadet unit in Glasgow. Here he is with John Fitzpatrick, or Fitzy as the boys knew him.
What was he like? How was he running the unit?
It was good, it was entertaining, it was fun.
Did you enjoy it?
It was to begin with. We'd heard that he'd been done with stuff before, but at that point, you're going, oh, there's Fitzy, he's taking him in there, he's going to be... It was just a joking thing between boys.
And when did that change for you?
It changed for me when I seen something happen.
One night, Colin was sleeping in a van on the roadside with John Fitzpatrick and another boy on a cadet trip.
And what happened was Fitzpatrick was lying in the middle, and myself and another on the other side, lying on the wooden benches in my sleeping bags.
And what did you see?
So I just happened to wake up, and as I happened to wake up, I turned round, Fitzpatrick was sitting up, and I could see the two fingers doing this and masturbating the other boy. And at that point, I turned back round and I grabbed my sleeping bag. And I used to have a knife that Uncle gave me. I called it a Rambo knife kind of thing. So what I'd done was I took that out of my rucksack, took it close to me and lay there. So he must have known that, or me being nervous that I have moved anyway. So he then lay back down and I just faced into the bench.
Were you scared?
I was scared, aye. It was that way where you were falling asleep for a wee minute but waking back up the whole night.
After what he'd witnessed in that van, Colin did talk to an older cadet. He thought it would be passed up the chain of command and action would be taken. Instead, he was summoned to see Fitzpatrick.
That night, I get took up into his office, get marched straight into his office. He asked me whether I was spreading any rumours about him. I denied all knowledge.
And after that, did you feel able to tell anybody else, or did you just stop talking about it?
I stopped talking about it.
John Fitzpatrick stayed in charge of the unit, and scores of other boys were under his care for years. The secrets of what happened in Glasgow in the 1980s remained untold for decades. Joe does house clearances. A few years ago, he got a call to clear out a flat in a tower block on the east side of Glasgow.
I got a phone call to go to a block of flats over at a side of the city that I don't normally go to. I don't normally get many calls, but with the internet, you can get a call to go anywhere. I still, even at this stage, I didn't know where I was going. And then as I got out the car park and I walked into the block of flats, everything hit me. It was like the smell of the place was exactly the same as what I could remember it 25 years before.
Joe was having a flashback. He had indeed visited the flats before. He too had been a cadet at Fitzpatrick's unit in the 1980s. He realised he'd returned to the block where John Fitzpatrick lived, where he'd been taken several times as a young boy.
It was like a privilege to be chosen to go to his house. But he used to take us in the back of an army truck that had no windows. So I didn't know where I was going because it was a different side to the city that I didn't recognise. I'd never been to before. I'd heard about the nights where you get to play computer games and it gets you drunk and you're allowed to drink, and it kind of felt kind of grown up. But then there was other things that went on there that weren't very pleasant.
Joe was 11 the first time he went to John Fitzpatrick's flat. After the boys had been plied with alcohol, Fitzpatrick put on videos for them to watch.
Pornographic material, but I don't mean pornographic material like an adult channel. I mean real hardcore stuff that I've never seen since I was in that guy's company or that guy's house. Images that have stuck with me in my mind to this day. If I ended up put images like that in any of my kids, I'd want to kill them.
After the videos ended, the boys would sleep on sofas in the living room of John Fitzpatrick's flat.
He would sleep in the same room as us, on the floor. And as I would wake up, he would move away from us. But the more confident he got, you could tell he was getting more confident, and he would kind of stay there on you, even though you knew you were kind of awake. Each of the 4 occasions that I woke up in the middle of the night with my trousers around my ankles, my pants around my ankles, and then over me, touching my privates.
Joe didn't speak about the abuse for 25 years. It was only that chance visit to the block where Fitzpatrick lived that made him go to the police just a few years ago. Last year, a rather different-looking John Fitzpatrick was charged with lewd and libidinous behaviour against Joe and 3 other boys. And this time, the case against him was proven. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
It was the biggest, best relief in the world when the guy in the jury stood up and went, guilty on all accounts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And she said, take him down, and I was cheering. That I believed it was a big, big weight off my shoulders. It's the MOD's responsibility to make sure that their kids are protected, and it's the right kind of people they've got in their positions. He worked, I don't know, say a decade in there. They must have hundreds of kids that went through at the same age, 11 to 13, 12 to 14. There must be so many more that could be out there that he's been sexually abused.
The abuse Joe suffered has had a significant impact on his life.
You'd forget it for years, weeks, months, and then it would hit you, bang. And I tended to drink to block it out, to not feel anything anymore. Don't know what to think about it.
In 2001, the Ministry of Defence's own police force did investigate historic abuse at Glasgow's and Lanarkshire's cadet units. It resulted in 2 former instructors being jailed. But John Fitzpatrick's unit wasn't part of the investigation.
OK, fellas, you're on your own from now on. This is where I lead you. Football Jones, see you at 579.
Joe is travelling to London for a meeting with lawyers David and Rebecca to discuss whether he has a financial claim against the Ministry of Defence.
It's a simple choice. What do you value more, the reputation of the organisation or the welfare of vulnerable children in your care? And clearly in these instances, they've made a terrible, terrible choice. I mean, there's absolutely no excuse for that to ever take place. And that's the thing that allows abuse to continue for years and years and years.
I've found that there's people could have stopped that worked in the MOD, that knew that he'd been accused of this before, that this had went to court before, yet they let him back in and then he's done that to me. I don't know how different my life would have been. I'm finding that hard to come to terms with right now.
He should never have been let anywhere near that group, and that you should not have come into contact with him. And if they had acted properly and stopped him from rejoining the group, then none of this would have happened. And because of that, they are negligent and they're responsible for what happened. From
To date, the Ministry of Defence has paid out more than £2 million to victims of cadet abuse. And that's likely not the end of it. Across the country, we've talked to new survivors who've never before spoken about their experiences. And we've found repeatedly that senior figures within the cadet forces tried to cover up the abuse suffered by children in their care.
Was there anything about the cadet force that made child abuse more possible? The children who joined the cadets were trained to follow orders, to obey authority figures. Was that exploited by abusers? Martin was an army cadet at Tennell Grange in South Birmingham. His commanding officer was Brian Leonard.
The atmosphere was one of a military establishment. You learn very quickly to obey orders. You learn very quickly to do as you're told and not to question. There was a culture of abuse from the offset.
What do you mean by that?
Well, part of the induction, part of the training as an army cadet was, I remember we were stood in a big circle and you literally had to punch your mate to your left as hard as you can in the face. That was part of your induction training. Probably not the official induction training, but that was what I remember, standing in a circle and punching each other in the face and trying not to cry, and that was part of the induction.
Was anyone aware what was happening to you?
Well, this is the thing. It was so blatantly obvious. It was almost as if it was hidden in full sight. We were systematically abused and raped repeatedly over many years. And you're trained to respect the elders and respect the officers and do as they tell you. And that does include having to lie on the floor on a dirty blanket and just lie there and take it. You just follow the orders. Just do as you're told. Do as you're told. Lie on the floor and take it like a boy. Otherwise, you're not made of strong stuff if you don't lie there and take it. Just take it like a man.
But Martin wasn't alone. We have spoken to 10 former cadets who were abused by Brian Leonard in the 1980s. For years, they all believed that nobody had ever spoken out about what had happened at Tennell Grange. They were wrong. Someone had tried to blow the whistle, and it was covered up.
In 1987, one of Brian Leonard's victims told his girlfriend what had happened to him when he was at the Army Cadets. It had ruined his life. She has never spoken about it before.
I was asking him all the time, you know, what's wrong? What's wrong? I could see he wasn't his normal self, and he just said, I've got something to tell you, but no one knows, and I don't want you to tell anybody. And he told me that he'd been abused at the cadets. When he used to go away on camps, you know, that this Leonard had done things to him.
Sarah went to Tennell Grange to find Brian Leonard. She wanted to confront him about what he'd done to her boyfriend.
And I just basically attacked him. I said, you've been abusing my boyfriend. And he said, oh, don't be stupid, he's a liar. He said a few things to me, pushed me towards this table and chairs, and I picked up this chair, and I remember I was going to, you know, launch it at him. But then this other sergeant came in and saw me, and he said, what the hell's going on here? And I told him, and he said, no, we'll talk to you, you know, I'll take a statement.
Sarah's statement set out how Leonard had abused her boyfriend. She also planned to go to the police. But like in Cheshunt and Glasgow, she was told not to.
Leonard said if I went to the police, it would be me more in trouble than him, because they've got proof that I attacked him and caused damage at the cadet centre.
She says the sergeant who witnessed the altercation promised he would pass her statement on to superiors. If he'd done so, you might expect an investigation. But neither Sarah nor her boyfriend were ever contacted about the abuse by Brian Leonard.
I should have investigated it. It shouldn't have been just pushed under. I am totally angry. I feel sick. I'm haunted by it. That they allowed it for so many years. They're responsible for everything. They should have been protecting me and my boyfriend, but they didn't, you know.
The Army Cadet Force had the chance to stop Brian Leonard, but they failed. At least one of the people we have spoken to was abused after Sarah had attempted to raise the alarm.
This is a pattern we've found repeatedly during our investigation, of cadet officers failing to help victims when faced with allegations against one of their own. The Birmingham case was one of the first taken on by lawyers David and Rebecca. It's also one of the biggest and most complex. What became clear was that Brian Leonard was not the only abuser at Tennell Grange.
When we first took on the Birmingham case, it quickly became apparent that the problem the MOD were facing with regards to the abuse in the cadets was potentially huge. We started off with one client and then grew up to 8 or 9 clients, and this is a case involving more than one abuser who was committing child sexual offences over decades.
Peter Cooper was an adult instructor in Birmingham, often working at the same cadet unit as Brian Leonard. Robert had joined the cadets at the age of 12.
And this is where they used to bring us on a regular basis in their vehicles and abuse us.
Soon after he joined, he was propositioned by Peter Cooper.
I remember one of the times working we had like a small kitchen area where you would make coffee and stuff for break time. And I was working in there, and Peter Cooper came in and he said to me, I'm going to have something off you by the time you're 16.
Did you know what he meant?
No, not at that time I didn't, but I think it became pretty clear within a very short space of time what he did mean.
One incident of many sticks in his mind. The day Cooper insisted the young cadet come to his house to pick up some equipment for a trip.
And he started to touch me. And then he took me into his kitchen and raped me in his kitchen. And I remember looking out of the kitchen window and just, there were fields behind his house. I was just looking at this fence in his garden, just transfixed on points to hope it would finish quickly. Just a feeling of, you've got no power to fight it, you're a child. There's nothing you can do about it.
Robert left the cadets and didn't tell anyone about the abuse. When he was 21, he began a successful career as a police officer. One day, he was at work at Steelhouse Lane Police Station in Birmingham.
I was asked to help make an arrest and told to go to one of the rooms at the police station to wait for these other officers to turn up. And I was just stood there, and in walked Peter Cooper.
His abuser, Peter Cooper, was also a police officer and had served with West Midlands Police for 32 years throughout his time at the Cadets.
Stuck his hand out and pretended I was his friend, and I shook his hand, and that scared me because I was an adult at that stage, and I suddenly realised that even though this abuse was never going to happen to me again by these people, this individual still had a huge amount of control over me. And what was more worrying, he was investigating people who were committing offences against children.
Peter Cooper was an officer in child protection for 4 years. For Robert, discovering his abuser's job was to protect children was a catalyst. He knew he had to act.
I just broke down one day, walked out of the office, and at that point, for me, it was a case of I was either going to end my life. I was at a huge junction where it was end your life or report it, and it was as simple as that.
Robert's decision led to Cooper's dismissal from the police force. He went on trial for buggery and indecent assault and went to prison. Throughout the trial, Peter Cooper maintained his innocence and does to this day.
You see a cadet coming in, he seems like any other boy, and within a few months he seems to have developed a great deal.
He knows exactly where he's placed. He says, right, here I am, I'm a recruit. Now, if I do so-and-so and so-and-so...
I think that the uncovering of this scandal around cadets is going to be massive. I'm glad that the spotlight is now being shone on that particular murky world.
Raised and eat with address. O God our Father, who has brought us together...
Peter Saunders, founder of the National Association of People Abused in Childhood, was himself abused by priests as a boy. He is a leading advocate for survivors of child abuse.
At NAPAC, we're aware of multiple cover-ups with many institutions going back many decades. They're all extremely serious. Any cover-ups of this nature are extremely serious and need to be dealt with, and certainly need to not be repeated. And I think the cover-ups that are being exposed here are as serious as anything that we've heard of in the 20 years that NAPAC's been running.
3 of the abusers in this film have served time in prison. Chris Day from Woodford Cadets, John Fitzpatrick from Glasgow Highlanders, and Peter Cooper from Birmingham. All are now free. Brian Leonard died in 1996, having never faced justice. As for Alan Waters, even after he'd abused Tony and Chesant, and his parents had been promised Waters would never have contact with children again, he rose through the ranks of the Sea Cadets for a further 23 years. But in 2006, he was finally brought to justice. He was arrested and put on trial in India for abusing and raping boys at an orphanage in Mumbai. It was run by his naval friend, Duncan Grant. The courts found them both guilty, but 2 years later they won an appeal. Waters gave an interview to the BBC protesting his innocence.
Well, they're terrible crimes to be convicted of. I mean, you know, I've been working on and off with people for years and years and years and years, and not a night, you know, no problems at all.
But sometime after that interview, the pair was sent back to prison by a higher Indian court.
Protect the innocent and punish those who abuse them. That was the message from the Supreme Court as it overturned the Bombay High Court's acquittal of 2 men accused of paedophilia.
Duncan Grant and Alan Waters, accused of one of the biggest child sex abuse rackets in the country, will now be sent to prison for 6 years, a vindication for the street children who managed to speak up against them.
But could those street children have been protected if the Sea Cadets had acted differently, faced with Tony's allegations 25 years before?
It made us feel terrible because we thought if we perhaps gone to the police, we could have saved that happening. I don't know.
Yeah, do you feel guilty?
I feel guilty about that, yes.
Waters returned to the UK in 2012 and was made to sign the Sex Offenders Register. In March this year, he still held a title in a naval veterans organisation, Honorary Secretary of HMS President Retired Officers Association. In response to the Alan Waters case, a spokesperson for the Sea Cadets said,
"The charity unreservedly apologises for any hurt or anger felt in regard to this case. It is not reflective of our organisation today. We now have a zero-tolerance protocol and a specialist team to enforce our policies and provide support. Our culture encourages our employees, volunteers and cadets to speak up, disclose and confront any issues."
For decades, the cadet forces in the United Kingdom have welcomed hundreds of thousands of children into their ranks. But throughout the 1970s and 80s, a significant number of those children suffered from a culture of silence. A culture which, rather than tackle the abuse going on, tried to cover it up. It was a serious institutional failure.
The Ministry of Defence told Panorama,
"Child sexual abuse is an abhorrent crime, and we have robust procedures in place to protect cadets. This includes all adults who work with children undergoing mandatory security and background checks, rigorous disclosure procedures, and regular safeguarding training. We encourage anyone who has been a victim or knows someone who has to report it to the police."
For Martin, the abuse he suffered from age 12 completely changed the course of his life.
I'll never really know who I should be or who I should have been. I got above average on the UK, left the United Kingdom Land Forces Cadet Leadership course. I was in the Royal Marines. I was told I should go to Sandhurst and get a commission in the regular army, and I would get a commission in the regular army. I'll never get those years back and those opportunities back because they were wiped off or wiped out.
It's hard to know the extent of sexual abuse within Britain's cadet forces. Panorama has obtained previously unpublished figures from the Ministry of Defence, which show that in the last 5 years, they've been made aware of 363 sexual abuse allegations. 99 instructors have been dismissed. The men who have spoken out about what happened to them have broken the wall of silence that surrounded the terrible events that took place in the past. What we don't know is how many more are out there.
Details of organisations offering information and support with sexual abuse are available at bbc.co.uk/actionline, or you can call for free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 077 077.